Welcome to another episode of the Acts 17 Ministries podcast. Today, I have a very special person with me, the one and only Tiffany Nelson.
Hi, how are you? I'm
So,
excited to be here.
so you had a pretty exciting, eventful week so far. Why don't you tell us what you're thinking?
Yes, it was quite exciting. We're finally catching up on some sleep, but on Tuesday night, I guess that was Tuesday night,
Mm.
after a really long process that we had discerning as a family some next steps to jump in on education and kind of come at it from a state level versus a local school board level. Decided to run for the state board of education. It was a very long and gosh, how many months was that?
You
Like,
announced in the beginning of September
that's right, because
of
we were,
2025,
yes, we were doing a ministry trip overseas in
South
South
Africa.
Africa, and I
That's right.
announced the day that we came back. So that was September. In September.
Right.
So
It was,
since September, it's been go 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 go. Then announcing a run for the State Board of Education, District 6. And 2 weeks of, you can tell by the tan. I do not have a tan, but he has a tan because
mm,
my chief of staff slash amazing husband was out in the parking lot. We were both out there from sun up to sundown, and you definitely took like the number one prize for being out there. But just, worked the parking lot, decided, where we needed to be and what the best opportunity to get out and meet with voters and talk to them about what's important in education. And after 2 full weeks in the parking lot, and for those that don't know, the district is huge. There are 2 million people in each district, and long story short, Tuesday night we were victorious in taking the seat for the Republican primary, which will be coming up in November, to hopefully officially be elected as the State Board of Education District 6 member.
well, I am so proud of you. And I'm proud of all those who got
Thank
behind
you.
you and who worked
Thank
so diligently to make sure that they supported you and got the message out. And actually, this started, like you said, we got back from South Africa. It actually started in South Africa and
Yeah.
before South Africa because we have some very close friends in ministry who
Mhm.
live in South Africa, who pastor there,
Yeah.
like the Moodleys, and they really prayed over you substantially while we
Yes.
were there. We were sent there to kind of minister to them, I guess
Right.
you could say, to preach and speak
Yeah.
and visit and pray over, but they ministered to us in ways far more than we could
Absolutely.
have ministered to them. And I remember them praying specifically over you. And that was the beginning, not just of a journey to get to where you are today, but
Right.
that was the beginning of a prayerful journey where
It was.
that was just the beginning of people praying over you
Yes.
through this whole process. And even though you visited probably hundreds of different groups in different settings and gave
Yes.
different talks, and that there were other candidates for other offices there, you really you really modeled what it meant to, and I think this has become sort of your life verse for this season. Matthew 6:33, seek first the kingdom of God,
Yeah.
and all these things will be added unto you. Actually,
Yeah.
seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness,
That's
and
right.
all these things will be added unto you. And so as you were seeking, people were getting behind you and praying over you,
Yeah.
not just from that time in South Africa, but then when we got here, of course, Grace Woodlands Church, and then our Sunday evening prayer call, people were praying over you.
Yeah.
And there are connections that you've had and we have together on Facebook and Instagram and X, and
Yeah.
all different sorts of people across the board have been praying over you. And it wasn't really just praying for victory, although they were praying for victory, and you can pray for victory, especially if you believe that it's lined up with what God's will
Yeah.
is, representing the values of the kingdom. But they were praying that throughout this whole process,
Yeah.
that God would be glorified and the kingdom would be advanced. And I think that, to me, it shows, this whole process shows just how faithful God is in being with us, because there are moments, I don't know about you, I'm sure, but there are moments where I was thinking, I don't know if I have the strength or energy cognitively
You
to
were
to go
being a
to these
Thomas.
events. And I was in the background, and you're the one in front of people. But as an introvert, I was drained a lot of times, but we just kept reminding ourselves that this is so much greater than
So
us.
much bigger than us.
First of all, it's our county, our district that you represent,
Hmm.
the state of Texas, and the nation, and more important than that, the kingdom of God. So there is so much to be said about this, but the pathway was definitely prayed over. And that journey was a journey of spiritual development, spiritual growth, and a development of people coming together and praying for you.
Like,
So the
yeah.
State Board of Education, I think that there are probably many listeners who really didn't know about what this State Board of Education was or that it existed. Some people still get the title wrong. They call it the State School
School
Board
board. Yep.
or the
Right.
School Board for Texas or the
Right.
Texas School Board. So you running has brought a lot of awareness, I believe,
Mhm.
to not just like ontologically what it is in its existence, what the State Board of Education is, but also practically what it does. So people didn't even know that it existed, and if they did, they really didn't know what the State Board of Education does. So maybe you could start by saying why you believed God was calling you into this based on your experience, your skill set, what it is, and why it's important.
Okay.
That's a lot right
I
there,
think I've
lady,
got
but
it.
you got
I
it.
think I've got it.
You've given these talks many, many times.
Well, yes, I have. And I think after a couple days of sleep, I feel like my brain is operating almost to full capacity at this point. But yeah, I mean, just kind of going back and obviously you know my story, but for the listeners, going back to the very beginning, being raised by a single mother and growing up struggling, attending 20 public schools as a child, which if you do the math, that's a
A
whole
lot,
lot of schools.
a lot of teachers,
Living
students,
in
it's
government
good to know.
housing and receiving free lunches, and that was a way of life for me. And with all of the instability and all of the struggling, the one thing that always remained was education. And education was a way out. It was an opportunity to live the American dream. And little did I know that was, I was what they call economically disadvantaged, or I didn't know those things. All I knew is that school and education was a place I liked being at, and I felt like I was good at it. And that was my way out. That was my way of the American dream. And so being the first in my family to go to college and the first in my family to graduate from college was a goal of mine. It was something that I always wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to do after that. I just knew that was a goal. And so that was my way out. So I would say that education and my love for education started back then as a child, because that was a safe place
Yeah.
for me. That was a stable place for me. That was a place where I excelled and I felt valued and I had worth, and I felt like I was good in school and I made good grades, and that was a place for me. And so education was always a huge part of my life. But I would say that I truly fell in love with education back in 2022 when three of us, who've we're called the OG original Mama Bears, when we decided to run for the Conroe ISD school board. And really, it was drinking from a fire hydrant because, as a parent, we have 6 children and we just come out of COVID. I thought, well, what do you do when you're home and can't go anywhere for COVID? Well, you get a master's degree. And so I deep dived and got a master's degree in Christian ministry and from Liberty University. And then what do you do after that? Well, you pay attention to what your children are bringing home. That was a real eye opener for us, because kids are coming home with homework assignments, and kids are coming home with
Reading
books that they are
materials. Yeah.
assigned and instructional materials. And if you didn't notice it before that, you really saw it
Yeah.
then. And that's, at that point, I became one of those annoying moms who sent out messages to the teachers. Well, why this? Why are we teaching this? And I think they already had something out for me at that point. But yeah, I met these 2 other wonderful and amazing women, Misty Odenweller and Melissa Duncan, and the 3 of us just are like sisters. We banded together and we decided that we were going to take this on. We knew that we had a 4th man in the fire all along. And we knew that we were called by God for such a time as this, to step into education, into the realm of education, and make a difference for not just us and our children, but something much bigger than that. And Melissa is a mom. She has 2 young boys who I believe are in the 4th and 5th grade. Misty is a grandmother, and her grandchildren are in another district.
Her daughter teaches, right?
But her daughter's a teacher, but
Yep.
in another district. And Misty was also an educator. And then there's me, who, we have these like 54 children. And so, and then my background just leading nonprofits
Yeah.
and, knowing our community and who they are and what they need, and serving our community from a nonprofit perspective. So together, the 3 of us just banded together and fought. It's a 7-member board, and fought against, the other for members on a lot of things, but fortunately we were able to get some things passed, like a book policy. And for a long time, you've got the people that who are calling you a book banner, but then you also have the people who are coming to the school board meeting, reading the
Yeah.
actual book that they checked out from the library and
Yeah.
showing the photos and reading the explicit
Yeah.
content of, I mean, the things that are actually in the books. Like, these aren't made up. These were
Yeah.
books that were checked out from the library of sexual acts, of
Mhm.
cartoon drawings of, and so these books existed. So you have the people calling you a book banner, but then you have the people who've got their 11-year-old daughter who can't unsee what they just saw on
Right.
your watch. I would come home from a board meeting and I couldn't sleep. I would feel terrible about what just happened on our watch. That was important to me, to make sure we got a policy in that removed sexually explicit materials from our classrooms and libraries. And finally, after it coming on the agenda the third time, it finally got passed.
Yeah.
But one of the first things, and I'll get to the rest of your question, but one of the very first
okay.
things that really kind of opened my eyes to the State Board of Education is very early on when I was elected. There was a gentleman who came to the board for a level 3
Yeah.
hearing, who has a doctorate degree from
He's
MIT
brilliant.
in
He's brilliant.
astrophysics or
Mhm.
something, like, just that way smarter than I could ever
He's
dream.
brilliant.
Maybe not smarter than you,
No,
but
he's
definitely smarter
no,
than me.
definitely smarter than
And he said he challenged our 5th grade biology book, and our biology book was teaching the Big Bang Theory. And
Mhm.
he said that the Big Bang Theory didn't belong in biology, that it was the study of atheism, and it belonged in history and world religion. And as I mentioned, I have my master's degree in Christian ministry. I'm married to an amazing and wonderful pastor, and I'm pretty sure that the world was not created by an explosion. And so that really hit me hard, because at that moment, and it was such a God moment too. Little did I know it would bring me to where I am today, but at that moment, I just thought, we have to teach truth to our children. If
Right.
you don't know how we were created, then we have failed as an institution.
And what did the
And
lieutenant governor say one time about education that was so powerful at one of the events, one of the hundreds of events that we've been at? He said something
if
about
you don't know where you came from, where you've been, and where you're going,
yeah,
then we failed you as
yeah,
an education
right.
system. And that is the basis of who we are. If you think that we were created by the Big Bang Theory and an explosion, then
An
that
accident.
completely
Yeah,
discredits Genesis 1. And if
yeah,
you discredit Genesis 1, then you've discredited the most sought after, most truthful book of all time.
yeah.
Then you've discredited the whole thing. And so it became, that night from the dais, I put it on the agenda. I made a motion, because it's in the TEKS. We can't change the TEKS from a school
Yeah.
board menu. But what we can do is we can add the intelligent design to compare and contrast to the Big Bang Theory.
It's basically secular humanistic,
Humanism, right? And so
right?
I put on the agenda, I made a motion that night during the level 3 hearing to add intelligent design to compare and contrast to the Big Bang Theory that night. And it failed. And as my wonderful and amazing husband knows, is not a good idea to tell me no.
I don't know what you're
So
talking about.
I was told no. It failed from the dais, but I was encouraged by our president to take it up with SBOE, with the State Board of Education. And I said, okay, fine. I
Yeah.
did, and worked with them for
You had a couple good, solid leaders on that board
yes,
that
reached out to them
made it
and
happen.
worked with them. The process was almost a year long. The TEKS are opened every 10 years or
Mm.
so. So this was what they call a proclamation. And a proclamation is some updates that you can make to textbooks and
Yeah.
things like that. So this was a
So
proclamation.
digital updates, because you can't reprint
Correct.
everything,
Yeah.
right?
So this was an update, a proclamation from 2024, and they made some science updates. And at that moment, they made 3 big updates to the
Mm.
textbooks, and one was including intelligent design for the first time in 20 years.
'Cause it was in there
It
before.
was previously in there,
Yeah.
and somehow, some
I mean
way, it was removed
and
from
I
the
mean, by the way,
textbooks.
some of the 9% of the most brilliant people in the world,
Yeah.
particularly the last 2,500 years,
Yeah.
believe that there is an intelligent designer, that
That's
there's
right.
a creator.
That's right.
So we're talking about
Right.
physicists and philosophers and theologians,
Yes,
not
all
just
those
a bunch of
brilliant
pastors
minds and scientists.
in a
Yes.
church. We're talking about the greatest minds that ever existed,
Yep.
the greatest minds that have led us to today, that have led the way to even having technology. And those people,
Yeah.
Newton, like one of the most respected scientists, most admired, brilliant
Mhm.
men in recorded history actually believed that
Yeah,
God created the heavens and the earth, that God
that's
set
right.
up the natural law,
That's
which is
right.
moral law, and God set up the laws of nature. And so
That's right.
to not have that in the textbook is not
And
just like human hubris, it's just stupidity.
it's one little thing. I mean, it's not little, but it's one sentence or one
Yeah.
little paragraph in one textbook for 5th graders. And I just thought, wow, what an impact. So for that proclamation, they included intelligent design, they removed primate evolution, and then they removed some sort of
Yeah.
anti-American language that they
Yeah.
had in some of the textbooks. And then I just thought, wow, like
Mm.
I cannot believe. So not only did the children of Conroe ISD now have this in their textbooks, now every child in the state of Texas now has this language in their
And a lot of
textbooks. And I
times we were
thought,
talking about this at lunch. When things get into Texas
yeah,
curriculum, when the
sure.
content is solidified in Texas,
Yeah,
Texas is a leader for the
right.
curriculum, the textbooks, right? So
So
that
so goes Texas, so goes the rest of the
so
country,
right,
right?
so other conservative states, because they're like-minded in how they
Yes.
approach education and approach a lot of things in life, actually,
Yeah.
they adopt, if not the actual textbooks, they adopt modifications of it as they apply them to their
Right.
state, right?
Yeah.
So
So
now that Texas says that, chances are a majority of the country, or half the states, or hopefully over half the states will adopt that as well.
right.
So it's not just about getting good
That's
content and
right.
curriculum to reflect reality, not just the values of the kingdom,
Hmm.
but reflect reality. It's
Right.
not just important to get that at the state level
That's
here in
right.
Texas, but to get it in Texas so it leaks into the other states.
That's right. Like you said, Texas and California are our 2 largest states. One's a red state and one's a blue state, and that's exactly true. So California and Texas lead the way. So red states will adopt or Texas's textbooks. Blue states will adopt California's textbooks. That's just the way it is. It's the way it's always
And when
been.
it
So
comes to textbooks, and also it fits under the broader scope that what SBOE does is they
mhm.
determine not just the
Yeah,
curriculum, they determine what gets into the
that's
curriculum
right.
because it's the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. These are objectives.
That's right.
And they determine, you all will determine what is being taught. Not
That's right.
necessarily how it's being taught, because that's sort of
Mhm.
leaks out into the curriculum and to the content and based on different personalities of the teacher, but the content.
Right.
And you said something, I just want to mention this because you and the school board here have been referred to as book banners, but you're not banning books. You're
Right.
taking content or curriculum or books and you're making sure they're age appropriate.
That's right.
Obviously, if you just look at this video, we're a family that loves books. I mean, and these are not just all Christian ministry, pastoral books. I mean,
Mhm.
we're talking about some of the most respected, well-known books in philosophy and psychology and sociology and history and theology, of course, and anthropology and science. So we love books and we love reading. I mean, we think
Right.
that reading is very important. And in the context of American history, I think reading is what was important for you as you got into the education system. And when it comes to education, we can't. I know there's a big discussion. Probably digress here. There's a big discussion where people want equality of outcomes. Well, that's impossible. Only God can
Mhm.
let it all be even in the end, so to
Right.
speak. But we want
Right.
equality of opportunity. That's
Right.
why we want good education in every single school so
Yes.
that every kid can have an equal opportunity.
Right.
I think it was Frederick Douglass said when it comes to reading and having the opportunity to learn how to read, if you learn to read, you will be forever free or something like that. So obviously we love books.
Yeah.
They have to be good books and they have to be books that
Age
contain the truth
appropriate.
and they have to be
Yes.
age appropriate.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
even the Bible is often delivered to children
Yeah.
because it's got some heavy stuff in there.
Mm.
It's delivered to children in an age appropriate way. I
Yes.
mean, there are children's
Children's
Bibles
Bible.
that
Right.
have certain stories that certain narratives, because they're not fictional stories, they're factual stories,
Right.
they're historical narratives. There are certain stories that we tell our children from the Bible, or certain pieces of certain
Sure.
stories we tell, and some we don't because it's not age appropriate. So
That's
even the
right.
Bible itself is taken and taught to children in a age appropriate way.
That's
Like
right.
when I was teaching the kids when they're young about David and Goliath, I didn't go into detail about the rest of the story, how he slayed the giant and then took the giant's sword and cut
Chopped
off
off
the
his
giant's
head.
head. I mean, that's
Yeah.
stuff you don't need to go into detail
That's
with
right.
a 5-year-old
Or the
about that. So
Bathsheba.
this is
Yeah.
so
Right.
not about banning books. It's
Right.
not about
It's just
anything
making it
about taking
age appropriate.
content, making sure, first of all, it's of value. And it should be taught alongside of strengthening their cognitive development and focusing on the basics.
Mm,
but also it should be taught appropriately.
that's right.
So
Well, and you mentioned too about, the duties of the State Board of Education. I had a long roundabout story and I didn't quite get to that, but just kind of touching back on that is, there are really five main duties of the State Board of Education. And it is a graduation, setting graduation requirements, improving instructional materials, approving the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and
the
Skills,
objectives, yeah.
and then also approving charter schools. And then lastly is managing the permanent school fund. And the permanent school fund is a $60 billion
That's
endowment fund.
significant
So
money.
that is the oldest and the largest education endowment fund in the nation. And so it's a tall order. These
Yeah.
are the really big tasks that the State Board of Education takes on. And recently, with the passing of the House Bill 1605, it really put a lot of power and emphasis on the State Board of Education
Mhm.
because it's like an Ezekiel watchman. The stuff that gets into the hands of children and grandchildren in the classrooms in all of Texas has an extra set of eyes
Yeah.
from the State Board of Education. And so, you saw it when I did it at Conroe ISD with intelligent design.
Yeah.
And also, there were some other things that I worked through once we were actually approving the biology and science curriculum. There were some things in there
Yeah.
that I thought were completely inappropriate. But here's the thing: when you raise your hand and you swear into office and you swear an oath that you're going to do what you need to do when you're elected as
And
a
uphold the
trustee.
Constitution.
Correct.
Every
And
elected
so
official does that.
when you go to raise your hand and approve curriculum, which is a huge part of what a local school board does, when you raise your hand to say, okay, yes, well, you recommend this curriculum, yeah, we approve it. You go ahead and order it and pass it out to the 75,000 students that are at our schools. I sure hope you read it
Yeah.
because and that's part of your job. No, you do not get paid as a school board member and you do not
Or
get
as a
paid
state
as a
board.
state board member, but it's your fiduciary duty to read the curriculum and make sure that it's something that you approve, something that you approve of. In particular, in the biology textbooks that later came to our board for an approval included it did not include the intelligent design language. Then I had
It
to
was supposed to.
it was supposed to. So then I had to be in touch with the publishers the
Mhm.
night of the meeting and get them to certify that problem would be taken care of and be aligned with the State Board of Education's proclamation. But then after reading through the textbooks, because this was recommended by the Teacher Recommendation Committee, looking through the textbooks of what they recommended, there were things in there that were
Didn't-
completely out of line. And so those were things I pulled out too, like Thomas Jefferson. This is a biology textbook. When you're teaching X and Y chromosomes, I don't know. When you teach X and Y chromosomes, you think maybe like here's a boy, here's a girl, like
Yeah.
pretty basic. But no, the application of X and Y chromosomes was a story about Thomas Jefferson, who had fathered the son of a slave because he had a matching Y chromosome. And then I thought, why are we disparaging our founding fathers and his sexual history to teach biology and X and Y
To elementary
chromosomes?
school students,
To
slavery is a major sin in America. But when you talk about slavery, it's good to put it in its place in history so you can
Yes, and
talk
I'm
about its
all
fullness
for
and
cross
see the evil of it.
curricular.
Yeah.
I'm all
But
for
it
that.
just didn't make sense
It
there.
it it just wasn't appropriate.
Yeah.
So, that's where like the Watchmen I was telling you about kind of comes into play. These are the things that I just don't feel that they're in alignment. We had a clear mandate in this last election. We had two Republicans in the race. That were running for this primary seat. One was definitely more on the conservative side,
Yes,
and
you
then my opponent,
You are.
who was probably more on the moderate side. And we had a very clear mandate by voters. In Harris County, I believe it was 63%. And Montgomery County was nearly
71%.
72, 71%. And those are big numbers in a two-person race. We had a clear mandate that this community is conservative,
Right.
that we are a conservative community. And I think parents have had enough.
Yeah.
I think parents, especially now with school choice here,
Yeah.
parents have a choice. Where do you want to send your children? And I'm a competitor. I've always been a competitor. If
Right.
if public schools are not doing what a parent wants for their child, then let's get better. Iron sharpens iron. Let's improve. Let's make public education a national leader in education.
And there's nothing wrong to say that we're not hiding anything. We want to impact governance. In this case, we want to impact education with the values of the kingdom, with biblical values,
That's right.
because Western civilization was founded on biblical values,
That's
and
right.
America was founded on Western civilization. Yes, it was not perfect. There were some things that were terrible in it.
Yeah.
And actually, the things that were terrible in that civilization were actually brought to light as things that should be addressed and corrected because, once again, of biblical values.
Right.
So everybody has an agenda in America when it comes to education. They're going to bring some sort of ideology or values. See, some people want to bring Marxist values. Some people want to bring a
Right.
mild version of that, socialist values, or
Right.
maybe communist values. Or some people want to bring other religious values. But it's appropriate and totally correct to bring biblical values since the nation was founded on biblical
That's right.
values. So you can't put a square peg in a round hole. And you can't put some non-American way of doing and thinking
Yes.
into an American way.
That's
So
right.
it just makes sense that we have people like you and like some other people just got elected in the primary to run for State
Yes.
Board of Education. It looks like they will. It makes sense to have people who line up with the foundation
Right.
of this country, which was a foundation built on biblical values. And this is why we're talking about it, particularly on the Acts 17 podcast, because Acts 17, it's famously known as the passage where it talks about the Christians being accused of turning the world upside down or
Yeah.
causing trouble all over the world. But Paul and Silas specifically visited certain areas or arenas
Yeah.
in Acts chapter 17. They went to the synagogue, so they went to a place of worship to communicate the message of the gospel there.
Mhm.
They also went to the marketplace. They ended up being questioned at the Areopagus, which is impacting governance. But then they also talked with the philosophers, with the Stoics and the Epicureans. They went to academia. They realized that in order to really change the world, in order to I mean, to have the world see that everyone is created in the image of God and everyone is equally valued, which,
Mhm.
by the way, is clearly a biblical standpoint. They, to make sure people knew that, they went and talked to the brightest of the bright so that they could get into the education system and discuss how you find truth, what is truth, and why
Mhm.
truth matters. And so that's why we're talking about it here.
Right.
That's why we have people like you running for office for State Board of Education. And that's why it's important if we want to see this country continue to thrive and be one nation under God.
Yeah.
We're not trying to stuff the Bible down people's throat. Not at all. Actually, I think that Sunday school and homeschool and home groups are the best place to
That's right.
teach Bible lessons and stories. But if there is biblical truth to be taught, it makes sense that the truth that was taught from the Bible in the foundation of this country
Right.
and in the history of this country is known by the students today. And they become aware that those sort of things, biblical truth in many
Mhm.
ways, if not every way, and American history and the American way of thinking,
Yeah.
they line up.
Well, it's interesting you say that because one of the things that the State Board of Education is working on are the history takes. So they have, you've attended meetings with me and you listen to them because I play them when I can't be at meetings. So it's very interesting. So the State Board of Education is comprised of 15 members, and each of them have about 2 million constituents, breaking up the entire state of Texas. The districts, as I mentioned, are huge. It's twice the congressional size.
That's
They're more constituents and the senators and state reps, and it's a huge district. So they're working on the history teach right now, and they're rewriting
yeah.
them. And the problem that the State Board of Education has come into is you've got the divide. You've got the Republicans and you've got the Democrats. Well, it's historically been a 9-6 spread, and you'd think that 9 Republicans. You'd think that would be good to go with 9 Republicans. But if you have 2 members that have, what they people are calling a swing vote, you're losing votes to Democrats. That gives you an 8-7 split. And so one of the things that we almost lost was the history teaks. It was a very heavy, the Republicans wanted a heavy emphasis on American US history and Texas history,
Yep.
America first. And the Democrats wanted a very heavy world history and a globalist viewpoint. Um, and so it was a huge argument. It was a very, very heated discussion. And early on, one of the swing voters swung to the other side and they lost the vote. And so later on in the week, I think he got a lot of pressure. And later on in the week, he ended up changing the vote and going to that, going to the other side to make it more heavy US and Texas history. And that's just it. That's the American exceptionalism is who we were. This is how we were founded. This is how our country was created. And even going down to our founding documents, which are
Yeah.
written in cursive, our children can't read cursive, and so they can't read our founding documents. I'm really excited about when I mentioned House Bill 1605 because it introduces high quality instruction materials, HQIMs. It's what they're called, and now all of the curriculum is going through an IMRA process, this instructional materials review process, where you have suitability reviewers and content advisors, teachers, people that are experts in the fields are
Right.
all going through, thousands of people are going through and reading this curriculum. Instead of, in the past, legislation said that materials needed to be 50% aligned with the TEKS. Now, because of HB
Wow.
1605 and HQIMs, they're 100% aligned with the
Mm.
TEKS. So I'm really excited about the
Yeah.
future of education and where it's going because of House Bill 1605 and the
Yeah.
HQIMs.
Yeah.
And I'm just really, really looking forward to all of the great things that are happening. Even the first round of HQIMs came out, and there were two that they approved for ELAR, English Language Arts and Reading, for K-5. And one of them was digital and one of them was printed. They both come, and that's where the permanent school fund comes in. They both come with some funding that comes in with this as well. So more funding that goes towards certain things means more funding for the classrooms and for students and improving educational
Yeah.
outcomes. And so this particular one that we adopted is heavy on classical literacy. It's balanced literacy versus structured literacy. It's phonics. It's cursive. We're teaching our children cursive again, which is so exciting. And I'm excited about the scoring that's coming out. I'm excited about the opportunity that we're going to have for our children to prepare them for world
Yeah.
outside of high
Yeah.
school. And Texas is amazing at a lot of things. Our economy is booming, medical, oil and gas, all the things, but education, not so much. Our students deserve the best, and we need to set them up for college, career, whether that's entrepreneurship or trades, or we need to set them up for military readiness. And that's our job.
Yeah.
And even when we met with the political science director or a
The local
professor
college.
at one
Yeah.
of our local college, I asked him, I said, what are you seeing when you receive students? It was a community college. When you receive students from high school, what is the number one thing that you're seeing that you think public education could help? And what do you say? Reading
And
comprehension.
so did the professor. We met
Yes.
another professor the other night. He said the same thing.
Reading
Yeah.
comprehension.
Yeah.
18-year-olds
Yeah.
are struggling with reading
Yeah.
comprehension. And I was blown away with that. And he mentioned founding documents in
Yeah.
cursive. And so I was excited to have the
Yeah.
solution for that. But reading comprehension. So one of the things the State Board of Education is working on right now is a approved literacy list of books that we're requiring students to read,
Yeah.
and from cover to cover. And really just holding a book and reading pages. And we really think that's going to help with reading
Yeah.
comprehension. So I'm excited about the future
Well,
of education.
I'm excited too, baby.
I'm
I love you. I'm
I'm
proud of you.
so
And
thankful for the best chief of staff
how about
ever.
that?
And
And you
thanks so much.
said Texas deserves the best. Well, they're about to get the best
Well,
with you.
that's a tall order, and I don't feel worthy, but with God on my side, I am.
Right.
And I just want to thank you again, and thank all of our supporters and our church and
Your fellow workers and laborers in
volunteers
the Lord.
and for all the man hours and all of the prayer and people laying hands on us and our
Yeah.
family and fundraisers and meet
Yeah.
and greet events. And I can't tell you how much that means to me and to us. And I hope that November goes our way, and I hope that
Yeah.
I make you proud because
It will.
I'm here working for you, and I hope that I'll make you proud.
Well, we're going to do this again. We'll talk more about education. But if you've made it this far in the podcast, I just want to give you a couple updates. We're going to continue this discussion, not just in education, but we're going to talk about the Act 17 part, not just in influencing education, but particularly governance. So we're going to have elected officials on here, and we're going to have candidates who ran for office on here in the next few weeks to really grab a hold of what it means to seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and to do so while being faithful to answer the call to step into the area of governance and the things falling underneath that realm, in this case, public education. So thanks for listening. I hope you join us again. That you could follow us on Facebook or on Instagram. You can
Subscribe.
follow us on or subscribe to YouTube. We appreciate your prayers. If you want to partner with us, reach out to us and we'll go ahead and grab chapter 17 by the horns together. And we'll continue to pray that God will use us to turn the world upside down for Him in the 21st century. God bless.
God bless.